There's a great verse. I believe it might be in Psalms. I can look it up. I didn't look it up, but the verse is in in the Jewish tradition, which is the Torah is the tree of life, and turn it over and over and over again, and you will find the 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 immortal life it offers. You could say the same with a course, and that's why we're doing this. We're reading A Course in Miracles, and we're turning it over and over again to get to the deeper meaning of it all. And if you don't think that it has more depth, that may be part of the illusion, right? If you don't think that there's something deeper going on with the course, it may be that you have not pierced the veil of illusion to see certain things yet. And I'm not saying that we're doing that here necessarily. But we're at least opening the door a little bit more to that. And I believe that those who are watching these videos and going on the journey with me may be coming to a deeper understanding of the course through this process. So here we go. This is from the Manual for Teachers, and this is from the clarification of terms, and this is actually number 1 in the clarification of terms, and it's mind-spirit. And this obviously needs to be clarified because the word mind is used quite often in the course. And what does it mean? What does mind mean? And how does it connect with spirit? And how does it connect with God? And how does it connect with Jesus? And how does spirit connect with the Holy Spirit? And how does what is meant by the mind of God, etc., etc. So let's read this. The term mind is used to represent the activating agent of spirit supplying its creative energy. When the term is capitalized, it refers to God or Christ, that is, the mind of God or the mind of Christ. Spirit is the thought of God which he created like himself. The united spirit is God's one Son or Christ. I'm sorry, the unified spirit is God's one Son or Christ. In this world, because the mind is split, the sons of God appear to be separate. Nor do their minds seem to be joined. In this illusory state, the concept of an, quote, individual mind, unquote, seems to be meaningful. It is therefore described in the Course as if it has 2 parts, spirit and ego. Spirit is the part that is still in contact with God through the Holy Spirit, who abides in this part but sees the other part as well. The term, quote, soul, unquote, is not used except in direct biblical quotations because of its highly controversial nature. It would, however, be an equivalent of, quote, spirit, unquote, with the understanding that being of God, it is eternal and was never born. The other part of the mind is entirely illusory and makes only illusions. Spirit retains the potential for creating, but its will, which is God, seems to be imprisoned while the mind is not unified. Creation continues unabated because that is the will of God. This will is always unified and therefore has no meaning in this world. It has no opposite and no degrees. The mind can be right or wrong, depending on the voice to which it listens. Right-mindedness listens to the Holy Spirit, forgives the world, and through Christ's vision sees the real world in its place. This is the final vision, the last perception, the condition in which God takes the final step himself. Here, time and illusions end together. Wrong-mindedness listens to the ego and makes illusions, perceiving sin and justifying anger and seeing guilt, disease, and death as real. Both this world and the real world are illusions because right-mindedness merely overlooks or forgives what never happened. Therefore, it is not the one-mindedness of the Christ mind, whose will is one with God's. In this world, the only remaining freedom is the freedom of choice, always between 2 choices or 2 voices. Will is not involved in perception at any level, and has nothing to do with choice. Consciousness is the receptive mechanism receiving messages from above or below, from the Holy Spirit or the ego. Consciousness has levels, and awareness can shift quite dramatically, but it cannot transcend this perceptual realm. At its highest, it becomes aware of the real world and can be trained to do so increasingly. Yet the very fact that it has levels and can be trained demonstrates that it cannot reach knowledge. So let's take that last point for a moment. Consciousness has levels, and awareness can shift quite dramatically, but it cannot transcend the perceptual realm. At its highest, it becomes aware of the real world and can be trained to do so increasingly. Yet the very fact that it has levels and can be trained demonstrates that it cannot reach knowledge. So keep in mind, first of all, that there's two realms that Jesus is talking about. He's talking about the realm of perception, which is the realm that we seem to be in right now. And there's the realm of knowledge, which really is the only true reality, which is God's reality, which is our true reality, because we are one with God, and we have always been one with God. But what is it? What is the we that is one with God? That's the question, right? Jesus says at the beginning of the text, he says this is a course in mind training. What is it that can be trained, though? He says it right here. What we're training is not really our true self, because that cannot be trained, right? Our true self does not need any training. But our minds can be trained to perceive the real world. And what is the real world? The real world is the world we see when we are in our right mind. And that's what he says here, is that there's wrong-mindedness and there's right-mindedness. Right-mindedness is what sees according to the Holy Spirit, which would be spirit, which is, what is spirit? Spirit is the thought of God, which he created like himself. The unified spirit is God's one Son, or Christ. So spirit is really God's God, to put it simply, even though the language here has to be dualistic in order to make sense to us. And we do have these terms. We have God, we have spirit, we have mind, we have Christ. So let's make sense of these terms in terms of the course. But keep in mind that the only reality is God, and even that term is it really in the way, Because what is God? God, this is where this can get confusing, and this is where the atheists are not incorrect. The theists are not correct, and the atheists are not incorrect. Because what is God? Theism is the belief in a personal God, in a sense. Atheism is the denial of a personal God, a God that creates a world in which there can be suffering. And the atheists are correct, I think, in denying such a world and denying that God has anything to do with such a world. And the theists are incorrect in positing that such a God created the world and has anything to do with the world once creating it, and creating such a seemingly random and unfair and messy realm of existence. So what I'm trying to say is, God for the Course is a different thing than what we normally think of God, because we normally think of God as a personal God. We think of God in anthropomorphic terms. We think of God as, in a sense, a bigger person, the old man in the sky, or the one that's in control of the whole shebang, right? Whereas the Course is saying, no, the God of which we speak is really, when we say God, we're talking about the only reality. If you could just clear away the dust or the clouds that are or the veils that are in the way of your seeing, you would realize that you are that, as the Upanishads say. You are that one reality. You are that supreme reality that has never changed and could never change. That would be God. This is what, as opposed to theism, some have called this monism. Is it monism? Is it non-dualism? Can you even put a name or a title to this? I don't know if anyone really can, because I don't know. I think all names and all words ultimately are limiting, right? So, and any name or any designation that you give is going to not do justice to what it really is, and it will color your way of thinking about it. And that's why Jesus doesn't try to, in the Course, does not try to tell you what it is. He doesn't try to say, and doesn't really put a name to it. He calls it love, calls it God, he calls it love, because we have those terms, and he's trying to correct the way we understand those terms. And he's saying, we don't really know what love is until we get there, and then we really know what love is, right? Love cannot have an opposite. God cannot have an opposite. Clearly, we see opposites all over the place, right? And if you look at the history of philosophy and theology to this moment, just go on YouTube and look at all the debates and all the talk that's happening. And if you take a meta perspective on it, and you look at it from above the battleground, you see a lot of people taking positions and taking sides and choosing sides. Like, this is what I believe, and I'm going to try to prove it to you. And the other side also seems to have a very good set of arguments and a good belief system. And they have their views, which from their perspective are internally consistent and make sense. But from the other side's point of view, is off base, bogus, really messed up. So and both sides think that of the other side. And it's the same in the world of A Course in Miracles. There's a lot of debates, and there's a lot of argumentation. And I think just the term argue, the Course is saying, argue and anger, they're not really justified, because anytime you need to try to argue for something, you're coming from a place of lack and limitation, and you're trying to prove something that does not need to be proven. Now, that's not to say not to do that, actually, because there may be a reason to do that, or call to do that, or maybe your job, or everyone's got to make a living in this world while they're still here. But it's just it's how seriously you take that, right? It's how you see it in your mind, and whether you take it seriously or not. But anyway, so there's a right-mindedness and wrong-mindedness, right? Right-mindedness would be seeing things as the Holy Spirit sees it, and the Holy Spirit is the voice for God in this world, the thought of God. It's the memory of God in this world, in our, you could say, in our heart. The thought of God, or the memory of God in our heart, that we still remember the oneness. We still remember the one reality, even though it's very hidden, but it's still there. You could say the joy, the joy of existence is still there. Even though it's seems to be very very much down, 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 but it's still there. Let's see, and so right-mindedness would be aligning our perception with that idea, which is that only God is real, only love is real, right? And the more we align our perception with that idea, which is that if only love is real, then any form of attack, any form of judgment is equally unreal. And why would we even want to, if we want to know our true self, if we want to abide in our true nature, then we really have to give up attack. We have to give up wanting to be right and needing to judge and needing others to be wrong and having any kind of unforgiveness towards others. So wrong-mindedness would be doing that and following our ego, which would be that part of our mind which believes in the illusion and which believes in separation, etc. And right-mindedness would be the part of our mind which knows that separation is an illusion and we are all one. And bottom line, there's only, in this world, the only remaining freedom is the freedom of choice, always between two choices and two voices. It's a great line. There's two choices and two voices. There's spirit and there's ego, right? There's the voice that speaks for the impossibility of separation, and there's the voice of the ego, which speaks always for the separation, that it is true, that it is real, and that we are better off continuing the separation indefinitely. And that's going to be our road to happiness, whereas spirit reminds us, no, that's not the way to the true joy, true happiness, true peace. That will never work. The only way is to remember that we are not separate, and that love already won and is one, and that is our true reality. Is there anything else? Spirit is the part that is still in contact with God through the Holy Spirit, who abides in this part, but sees the other part as well. So the Holy Spirit is like the bridge between God and between our world, and so knows what the problem is and knows how it can be helpful. By the way, the Holy Spirit, in a sense, does not do anything. The Holy Spirit is just a reminder, and it is that part of ourselves which knows what the problem is, but also knows what the solution is at the same time, and knows that the solution is forgiveness and non-judgment. The term soul, the Course only uses it in biblical quotations, but the soul is basically equivalent to spirit. The other part of the mind is entirely illusory. It makes only illusions. That's the ego, right? Spirit retains the potential for creating, but its will, which is God, seems to be imprisoned while the mind is not unified. Creation continues unabated because that is the will of God. This will is always unified and therefore has no meaning in this world. It has no opposites and no degrees. So God, God has never changed. In other words, God has never changed. As Meister Eckhart, the great German mystic, said, God is at home. It is we that have gone out for a walk, right? It's we that are following the ego, and it is we that need to learn how to undo the ego. And that's what Jesus is presenting in the Course, is how to undo the ego to get back home again. So, and the way to, how do we undo the ego? Well, we have to start to see as the Holy Spirit sees, which is with complete non-judgment and accepting the atonement principle, which is that separation from the oneness, from the whole, is impossible. We have never been separate. We could never be separate. And we are not separate even now. Even this moment, we are not separate. And even in this very moment, we could remember the true reality and return home this moment. We probably won't though, because we will there's still some work to do. Now that in a sense it seems crazy, and in a sense you might say this is a huge leap of faith, and a huge how can we trust that that's true? And Jesus basically says, well, I'm just telling you it is true. It is true, and I know that you know, even though you think you don't know, but you do know. And just trust me on this one. And you've already been doing the course anyway, because you already know in your heart that forgiveness doesn't work, judgment doesn't work, and you keep doing the same stupid things over and over again. Do you want to get out of the patterns? Do you want to break free of the cycle? And if you do, then here's how. I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom. And so anyway, more to come. That was a long spiel on a very short passage. It was just 1 page long. But anyway, I hope that was helpful, and we will continue and turn it over and over and over again. The tree of life. Thank you.